What the hell is wrong with you? Hi, everybody. We're live now. So, welcome to another Patreon Hangout. It is, believe it or not, this is the 64th one of these we have done together. Not all of us. We haven't all been to all 64 of them, but I have.
Let's say pretty much just you.
Pretty much just me. I'm the only one who's. I'm the only one who's been in every episode.
Mm-hmm. You're a regular.
I'm a regular in my own patron hangout. Isn't that weird how that works out?
Who would be second though, Steve?
Lauren,
yeah,
probably
troubleshooter.
Lauren.
He would be second place, I think. And then Geek, you would probably be up there in third or fourth at least. I mean, you've been a regular for a while.
Since 2 years ago, number 34 was my first one, and this is 64. So it's like there was only one that I missed. Only one that
you missed since you started coming.
Hey everybody, it's Nick here. It's been a rough few days. We're about a week into the outbreak, but keeping on.
I love that. I love that he interrupted to put in his zombie apocalypse bit. That was great.
Man.
Yeah. I think you look cool. I mean, maybe it looks different. I think you look cool.
Thank you.
Like Nick said in the pre-show that when I shaved my beard, some of my beard got transferred over to Nick. So
and very quickly, it's like that scene in the Santa Claus where he shaves it, it comes back in a few seconds,
I'm in big trouble. But Nick's beard is at loading. It's at 25% right now.
25% opacity.
Mm-hmm.
See, Nick,
are you saying that the rest is there? It's just transparent.
Yes.
You need to slide it over. You need to fade it in. Nick, I think you said zombie apocalypse, which is funny. I think you look like an investigative reporter from the 70s who's been up all weekend chasing a big story.
Just sitting, just like I'm in a stakeout. The other guys left for a little bit. I'm just in the car.
If you had on like a wrinkled white or off-white button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and maybe like a loose dark necktie, that's it. That's the look.
I don't think I have that.
You're like Robert Redford from All the President's Men.
Okay. Well, enough about me. This is about me.
I like to assume that he's suffering from a corona outbreak, not the virus, but just he drank too much Corona and
he drank too much Corona.
Just wait. They're finding all sorts of ancient viruses we didn't even know existed in ice cores. So just wait until climate change releases all of those new pathogens into the air, and
that's what happens when people refuse to heed the message of the Thing. The Thing teach us
exactly
that
that's one of my favorite movies.
The John Carpenter one.
Okay.
We drill into these million-year-old ice sheets, and who knows what is being released.
That's one of my favorite movies.
It's such a great movie.
So many things I love about it. Have you seen the commentary of it where Kurt Russell, he just laughs his butt off throughout the whole thing?
No, I saw someone wrote about it recently though. I've never watched the commentary, but it doesn't surprise me.
It's like all those great horror movies, they tap into a specific, very common human fear.
Yeah.
Alien, well, I guess that's the fear of being violated, I guess,
Yeah.
I'm not going to delve too deep into that. I'm sure we've all read essays about it already.
Yes,
I think the Thing is more about disease, maybe even STDs, but just something that you lose control over, what happens to your body. It starts rebelling against you.
Yeah.
And
well, there's so much going on in the Thing. That's what makes it such a cool movie. Is that there is there's the infection, the sort of infestation metaphor. There's the issue of trust, and having to take other people at face value, and having to risk what they could do to you if your trust is misplaced. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff.
I love the detail where Fuchs is everybody should open their own cans. Because just think about it, if you had one guy doing it, he could just very easily go, cut his finger in it, let some thing blood into it, and then that person drinks it and gets converted.
Yeah, and then
spooky.
And then just on a totally superficial level, it's just an awesome horror movie. I mean, It's The Thing is a great movie.
But I was trying to think of like one of my favorite things about. Oh yeah, one thing I like doing it upon like new like rewatchings of it is try to like parse out which body parts are being used for the thing's constructs. Like the dog thing, the kennel thing as they call it. Just before they burn it, you see like this flower made up of all the teeth and tongues put together, like petals. Oh, that's so weird. It's like the mass is all still there. It's just been repurposed. Like, hey, now this rib cage is a mouth. It's so great. It's just clever.
That's an interesting thing also about the thing, because like some horror fans like at the time 1982 1984 or something like that they hated that movie because like no that breaks John Carpenter's breaks the rules of horror. You do not show the monster, the dead center in the film with like bright lights and everything like that. And Guillermo del Toro was like, I saw it in Mexico, everyone loved it. I don't know what people said that like they didn't like.
You see, the thing about the thing is that you never see what the monster really looks like. It even has an original form. It can be whatever it wants. You can't trust anything. You can't assume you've seen everything.
Yeah.
Well, when it first came out, a lot of people who didn't like it sort of dismissed it as just a gross out movie. Because some of the shots of the creatures are so graphic and so gross, and so like the design is so grotesque, and they're like reaching out and pulsating and fluids are coming out, and it is really disgusting.
You just have to imagine like how painful the process for the thing itself is to reconfigure, assuming it has all the same nerves and everything, and yet it does this, and then you have to wonder, does it even understand what it's doing? Does it know how horrific the process is for us, and it's just going, whatever, fuck it, I'll do it anyway?
Right. Is
or
it just an
does
animal?
It sincerely not know?
Yeah.
Someone made this really interesting fan fiction that had like the whole movie from the thing's perspective, as it was trying to figure out why we were attacking it, why we were resisting its attempts to merge with us, to give us communion, this is how it reaches out to us. And then it realized that instead of being fluid and being able to change our shape at will, we were like stuck in this one shape that eventually breaks down and fails. It's like, oh, that's such a sad existence. And then it realized what this thing is. It's just a clump of cells bunched up in one spot, and thought like, oh my gosh, that's like a tumor. I'm battling it's like I'm battling a thinking cancer.
I mean,
so close.
Well, it's like.
Oh, go ahead.
I think about like cancer and something like that. Cancer is like disease of like rapidly growing dead cells, and it's rapidly growing and expanding at like 3% or something like that. You know what also tries to wants to rapidly grow and constantly grow year after year even at like 3%? Capitalism. So capitalism is cancer.
A virus.
Just one last thing. I linked something in the chat. It's an illustration I did called "Who Goes There," and it's when I think Blair thing got Childs. Assuming we're going with the theory that Childs is a thing at the end of the movie. This is how I think it would have happened, because there's something about that part of the facility is there's a room. So the room where Childs was standing guard, where he almost falls asleep. There's a door directly behind. And then in the next room, there's another door. So it's like you've got these two rooms, and then you've got another room next to them that kind of bridges the two. So I think Blair went around and behind Childs and caught him as he was dozing off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was Keith Davis's character, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's there's this really creepy shot where you see it pan up from the basement, and you see the parallel room, and you see where Childs was standing, except the door is open now. So I think they were implying that's how it happened.
I love Keith Davis's voice. He's a great voice actor. He was one of the generals in Mass Effect. A lot of people know him, but I know him as Goliath on Guard Cars.
Yes,
I know him as Spawn in the cartoon and the
games.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the HBO comics.
And he's become the go-to narrator for Ken Burns too.
He's got that kind of voice that's really gruff, but also beautiful.
Yeah, he's got. It's
just something smooth about it. He could read Shakespeare to you and give it gravitas.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and he also was really funny in There's Something About Mary.
Yeah. He got chops.
Is it the twig of the berries? Is it the frank of the beans? And then he sees he's got himself caught in dirt, and he goes, "Oh, for God in heaven's sake!" Like he just completely drops any pretense of dignity.
So how has everyone been since last month in the start of the decade?
Ooh, controversial.
Yeah, I don't care
There
anymore.
are those who say it is not that we are in the last year of the decade, not the first.
We
year.
don't count to 9, guys.
I don't care either, but I mean, you know.
I mean, we got a lot of more things to like worry about than
just-
like when the start of the decade.
I'll
is.
just say this: how does it make sense that the last year of the teens is 2020?
The first year of
Like that doesn't make any
Well,
sense. I'm
you know what
I'm making a lexicographic argument. I'm
We're
making a
also
linguistic argument.
We're also in the 21st century when we're in the year 20.
Yeah, that's all messed up. We need to figure something out about that. We need to.
But you know
retcon
what
that.
else? You know what it makes me think of? It's like, wait a second. Is there a secret missing year? Whatever happened to year 0?
Well, you know what,
There's that.
You know what blew my mind in high school when I first learned about the history of the calendar? I saw someone Robert Mills in the live chat just said, "How did you get the Frank above the beans?" So I'm still thinking about There's Something About Mary. No, but what blew me away when I learned about the history of our calendar is how, like, really in real time there was no year 1, year 2, year 3. Like that calendar was introduced in like the year 300 something, and they just started there and just said, okay, you know, Jesus was born 350 years ago, whatever, so that'll be year 1 back there, and we're currently in year 300 whatever. And so there's like total, you know, centuries of time under our current calendar that were not covered under the calendar. We're just sort of retroactively added in, you know. So technically speaking, there was no year 1 for our calendar because during that year, nobody was going by this calendar.
Oh, geek. I just looked at the chat on YouTube and I saw like all of these links. You always do this. Like, why are you so good to us? Why are you help people so much?
Also
Geek is
more
really
recently, I want to say in the, I think it was the late 1800s or the early 1800s.
Yeah.
Where they did a major revisement of the calendar to add in to shift the days based on the leap year.
Yeah.
The fact that the rotation of the Earth is like 365.25 and not 365.
Yeah.
We also got leap seconds that we're not counting for as well.
Because the calendar was legitimately like shifted when that happened as well.
Yeah, well, that was that was when they updated it from the Julian to the Gregorian.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the Gregorian is basically identical to the Julian, but they just shifted
Plus daylight savings.
Yeah, they
I
shifted
like
the dates.
Or not daylight savings, but leap year.
Leap years, yeah.
I like stories that take place so far ahead of now that you can't be certain when. Like you can see a calendar that says like, oh, the year 4000 something. No, that doesn't mean 2000 years from now. It just means that they might have restarted their calendar,
Right,
maybe
who
even
knows?
more than once.
Well, you know, that was originally the idea behind having star dates in Star Trek, and that's why in the original series, a lot of times it's kind of fuzzy as to what time period it's supposed to be in, because if you go just by dialogue, sometimes they seem to be talking as though they're in the 22nd century. Sometimes it sounds like they're in the 24th century. Like they hadn't really nailed down where, you know, what year the show took place. That's why they had star dates, because it sounded futuristic, and Roddenberry figured, well, they wouldn't still be using our calendar. You know,
Captain Kirk, stardate now.
Start
Oh,
date
yeah.
11.5.682.4. Well,
Start dates. Whatever. What? I drink the cream stuff.
a week after the last one. I don't know.
One of the craziest stories I've seen like picks up in the future was further than like any other I've seen that still like had humans in it, and it picks up 1 million years from now.
Ooh.
And in that time, we have like reached like Star Trek level civilizations and fallen back to like prehistoric times 7 times.
I think DC
Like, so
has
many
a universe like that
civilizations.
too.
So and it's like it's played up kind of like a fantasy universe, because like at this time when the story picks up, we're still kind of in a medieval lifestyle, and there's all this leftover technology that the people don't understand from all these past super advanced civilizations that they just assume are magic, like nanomachines, like forms gray goo, and so people think it's some kind of slime monster, and you can't let it touch you or it'll get you. And it's just so fascinating how it's like it's a fantasy story, but to anybody who's familiar with sci-fi concepts, they'll get into it and they'll see, no, that's this, or wait, is that like, are those blueprints for a Dyson sphere? That kind of thing.
Well, there's been like video games where you can easily just like have it be sci-fi in some elements, but also be a fantasy game quite easily, like a Star Ocean. I mean, some of those games are just like extended long away missions, as you can say, or just like, oh, I'm from the spaceship, but now I'm on this fancy planet where there's magic and stuff like that. And we also can have that debate about like Star Wars. Is it sci-fi? Is it fantasy? They're space wizards, and so it's how you define it. As genre itself is kind of like a nebulous kind of thing as well, because like I used to be in those kind of debates, like that's not anime, it's not Japanese, it's like that shit, don't call it anime. But now like that, I don't call it anime, but fine, whatever.
And then there's a great example you brought up, like I think it was just before the call started, you brought up Horizon Zero Dawn, where the machines, they all look like animals, they act like animals, they have their routines, they go about their day, they have their territories, they prowl around, and it's just such a fascinating concept, is like programming machines to behave like real animals. Like, why would you even do that? But why not? It's just neat.
Yeah, why not? Exactly. Go ahead, Joe.
What do you call it? When we were talking about that, there's a really good book series. Dragon Riders of Pern is the first novel, and essentially for like 7 books, it's like, like a really, like, it seems like a really grounded fantasy world. It has fantasy concepts, but it's like none of it's really like shown as magic. And then all of a sudden in like book 8, it's like, and we dug up a spaceship that we forgot about, 2,000 years ago, that this is how we all got here. And then all of a sudden it like shifts dramatically to like science fiction. It's so good.
Sounds like World of Warcraft.
Okay, so is anybody here?
How come the Warcraft Starcraft crossover hasn't happened yet? I would love that game.
It's like I still see people try to theorize whether those two series happen at the same time, just in different parts of the galaxy, or if Warcraft is in the future, or what. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so I assume like at least some people here are passingly familiar with Transformers, right?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody?
And of course he has something Transformers related within arm's reach.
I saw the movie in theaters and I got a poster of it.
Anybody here familiar, even vaguely, with Beast Wars?
Oh, I love Beast Wars.
I watched it when I was a kid a little bit.
Yeah, that was interesting because it was like a future generation of Transformers where they had smaller bodies that consumed less energy, and they could now disguise themselves as the local life forms of whatever planet they settled on.
Well, and they had to do, in the original Beast Wars, they had to do that because
I know
it was Energon that like was too much of a good thing and would like overload their like sensitive bodies. So they
but I assume that the point is they can do that, and I assume if they had settled on some other planet that had its own life forms and they needed to disguise or shield themselves from whatever reason, they could do that there too.
True.
So, but the thing that was interesting about that is it jumped back to prehistoric times. That's where the characters went. Then there was this Japanese series called Beast Wars 2 and like Beast Wars Neo, which picks up in the future. Could be a few centuries, could be a few thousand years. The point is, it doesn't look like humanity's living here anymore. You occasionally see ruined buildings or tanks or such, and it seems like we either blew ourselves up or migrated to some other part of space. But the thing that's boring to me is that all the Transformers in that they still turn into normal modern animals, like a normal horse and a giraffe and a penguin and a rabbit. And I'm just thinking, well, if it takes place in the future, why not make up some crazy, weird future, like hyper-evolved animals, like In the Future is Wild, or Marc Boulet's Domaine des Animaux du Futur, or Dougal Dixon's After Man.
Or go all the way back to like dinosaurs. Well, Beast Wars already did that.
Or again, Dougal Dixon's After Man books. I love speculative biology, speculative evolution. Just imagining what creatures might come about in the future. And so I ended up making a comic called Beast Wars Future, which is exactly that. It picks up 350 million years ahead of today, when the Earth is basically on its way out because the sun has already started to dry it up a little bit. And it becomes this weird Lord of the Flies deal where you have these characters that are essentially children that don't know about Cybertron or Autobots or Decepticons or any of that stuff. They just know that unlike most of the animals here, they can change. That's kind of neat. And it just shows like how they're trying to get by on this future world, because it's basically what I wished a Beast Wars sequel could have been. We've seen prehistoric times. We've seen the day. Let's go the other way.
Yeah. Well, the Beast Machines, like they at least had like in the third season or the final season, they had like Botanicas, like the plant transformer as well. So
that was neat.
Yeah,
Beast Machines did something kind of interesting too, because like I don't know, it was always left a little vague in the first seasons whether or not they had actual animal parts or if it was synthesized fur. If it was fake. But then Beast Machines comes along and says, no, you're reformatted. So now entire portions of your body are actual organic tissue. You are cyborgs now, not robots. And I'm thinking, wait a second, it basically just became Bionicle characters.
Yeah, actually, in a way. But no, Beast Wars was a great show because it's for each of the final episodes of the final seasons, the bad guys win. And you're just like, what's going to happen? Optimus Primal's dead. Oh, fuck.
I think Rat Trap might have been my favorite character because at first, scumbag as the coward, the pessimist. But then later on in the series, he gets some amazing moments. He is a courageous little guy. Like he's basically Rambo at some points, despite being like the shortest of the bunch. I just love Scott McNeil as a voice actor. He's done so many great voices. He voices like half the characters in that show.
Now, just like with like anime, there's some animes you just gotta like slug through the early episodes of Beast Wars to get to like some of the good episodes, and I think just like in some animes, up until like episode 5, when Beast Wars actually finds the stride and gets really good.
Since we're talking about Transformers, I just want to put in a good word for Rodimus Prime, because I stan Rodimus Prime. I think he did not get a fair shake. I think that was an early instance of the fan base turning on the show and not giving the show a chance. They were trying to do something different. They were trying to do something to keep the show fresh, and we did not even want to hear it. They could not bring Optimus back fast enough, and that's a shame because I liked Roddy. I had a Rodimus Prime toy. I loved it.
I feel like calling you my brother right now
because it was like Hot Rod got promoted. It was cool.
Yes,
but it's so hard for me to find like other people who like this character. I mean, look, the thing is, in season 3, he has this whole thing where he has to measure up to the previous leader. He has all this work cut out for him, but just in terms of his voice and the way he acts, I think they made him kind of a wet blanket of a character, and it's sad because in the movie itself, before season 3, which I think really killed him. The movie itself is the perfect introduction. Like, what is the first thing we see this guy doing? He's fishing with a little human boy. Why? He doesn't need to eat the fish. No, he's just spending time with a kid. And I can so easily imagine a scene before that where Spike's like, "Hey, Roddy, I'm going to space for a bit, and my son, he doesn't have like that many friends to hang out with. So could you keep an eye on him, while I'm away? Just be a big brother to him." And Roddy. Sure, man, don't worry about it, because he's just that kind of upstanding guy.
Yeah.
I love that. That like instantly endeared me to him.
Yeah. Yes, no nerd alerts. Look who's talking.
Well, look, I'm old enough that I watched those shows when they originally were on. So I remember, Optimus dying, and I remember Hot Rod, and I remember, Hot Rod being made over into Rodimus Prime. And so that all happened in real time for me. And I thought it was awesome back then. Like, I was sad that Optimus died, but it's like, there's this weird thing where you can like both. You can think that Rodimus Prime was a cool idea and a character that maybe wasn't given enough of a chance, and also still like Optimus. I mean, it's like you can like Kirk and Picard. You don't have to hate one in order to like the other.
I like transitionary periods where, like, okay, yeah, there's a cynical reason for where they just wanted to kill off a bunch of characters so you would buy toys of new characters.
Yeah.
But in the story, I think it worked out surprisingly powerfully, because the first 20 minutes of that movie is basically the final episode of the Transformers as people knew them at the time. This gruesome, awful, like, wreck of a battle. And you'd think that would be where the story ends, but then no, you have to see what you see what happens to, like, the next generation, where they have to, where do they go now? How do they take care of themselves? And I mean, Movie Bob, Bob Chipman, he talked about this in his Really That Good series, and it seemed like one of those things that was kind of relatable to people who were alive at the time, many kids who had lost their fathers in Vietnam, etc. That it was therapeutic, much in the same way the first Star Wars movie was.
Yeah, well, and you're right. Like, it is just like with my all-time favorite, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Like, it is a toy commercial. Like, the Transformers cartoon is a glorified toy commercial. So that makes it even more impressive and even more of a creative risk when you see, like, oh shit, they're trying to get us to feel feelings. They're actually trying to tell a story with this one, and trying to and cashing in on our affection for these characters, and saying, hey, they love Optimus Prime, let's break their little hearts.
and still tell a story,
and then introduce the next. I mean, it's really it's a very gutsy move, and it's what separates. I think that there's a reason why there's really only a handful of shows like that from the 80s that we still remember, and that people who weren't even alive back then can still discover and get into. And there are so many other shows that were on at the same time that nobody even remembers.
Exo Squad.
That were the same thing.
Lords.
That were toy commercials that were just there so you could have something to watch while you played with your action figures, and and to get you to buy more action figures, and that was it. And the reason we still remember Transformers and He-Man and Thundercats, I would argue, and maybe one or two other ones, G.I. Joe, is because every once in a while,
Gemini the Hologram says he made a comeback.
But like, it's just every once in a while they would actually try to tell a meaningful story. And and that's the one you remember. Like, you remember the episode.
You just need a good writer.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, here's the thing. I have something that I grew up with in 2001 that was kind of similar. It's of course, Bionicle. That was almost the exact same situation, because at the time, Lego, they didn't really do stories, and they were releasing these early action figure lines like Robo Riders and Throwbots, etc. And each one would only go on for about a year to maybe a year and a half. And then they would just scrap it and move on to the next line. And they were surprised that sometimes kids would get attached to these characters and want to see where they'd be the next year. And Bionicle here was set to be another case of the same thing. It would just be a one and done, 1 year. And a writer like Greg Farshty, he looked at it and was like, no, guys. Well, maybe it wasn't even him. It was like a few people who thought, no, you got enough material to make this rich, sprawling lore. Don't just waste it in the first year and kill it just like that. And what do you know? It did become this huge, sprawling narrative that was enthralling year after year because the right people got their hands on it. And I can't even emphasize enough, like, what is his name? Christian Faber. He was the art director for the whole thing. And he came up with all this inspired imagery for it. And the thing that really clinched it was when he had cancer and he had to take daily medication for it. It was a benign brain tumor, but you still don't want to have to live with that sort of thing. And he eventually got better. But while he was taking that daily medication, he basically thought, what if inside every pill was a tiny soldier that would fight to save you from within? And look at what the original figures are packaged in. These canisters that deliver them to, the island, and they are shaped like pills. And as it was eventually revealed, most of it took place inside a giant, like, continent-sized body. So that's what the name means. Biological Chronicle. It's a story about biology. And I'm just thinking, wow, what an inspired concept.
Yeah.
It's all because a guy who had cancer was able to put a spin on it.
By the way, Nick Letourneau's in the live chat, good friend of the show and good friend of me, and also co-host of Social Justice Alchemy every Saturday at 6 p.m. UTC. That's 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yesterday we had Anarchist Anatomy Hour. Leto says that, like, I watched Nick on DeviantArt. Please tell him, Jonathan.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
A fan.
Yes.
Who wants to talk about Star Trek?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you,
I haven't seen it, but go ahead. Just talk away.
So for anybody who hasn't seen the first episode of Picard yet, we'll try to keep it spoiler free. Although there isn't.
Go ahead.
There's not like, I mean.
Well, there's audience and there's people watching that might not have seen it.
Yeah, I mean, nothing too like shocking happened in it. Like, there's nothing that I feel like if we did happen to let it slip, it would ruin it for anybody. But just in case.
So we shouldn't tell them Picard dies in the
No,
first
don't
episode.
tell them that Picard dies in the Picard. They kill off Picard in the first act. I was shocked.
Hey, they're pulling Optimus Prime. That's a brave move.
Patrick Stewart is a delight. I don't know if anyone here like follows his Twitter feed. I love just the photo of him up to here in the ball pit. It's just amazing. But one of my favorite things is that like he fairly regularly posts are just him with dogs, with pit bulls, etc. It's just
my personal favorite fake spoiler for Picard is, I didn't think that they'd have Russian gangsters kill number one, and then Patrick Stewart just goes around just murdering everyone.
John Wick.
Everything I knew told me I'd be safe with you.
Yeah. No. I thought. I mean, like I think I said to someone on Twitter. I mean, I thought. I didn't think it was like a masterpiece or anything, but it was a really, really great first episode, and I'm super hyped for the rest of the series. Like, I think it's a very strong beginning. I mean, I think.
Question for the group: the best pilot episode of Star Trek ever?
For me, it's between either Emissary on DS9 or Caretaker on Voyager. Believe it or not. I think those are both really super strong pilots.
I'd almost have to go with Emissary, just because Emissary isn't cheapened by the series.
Yes,
like
that's a good point.
Like it didn't write it didn't cash a check that or you know what I mean.
Yeah,
it didn't write a check that the series just immediately refused to cash.
But see, I would argue for Caretaker for the exact opposite reason. I think that the eventual mediocrity of the series makes the pilot look even better. Because I'm always surprised, because I've watched the Voyager pilot several times over the years, and every time I watch it, I'm always surprised by how good it is, and by how much I wish that the rest of the series had picked up more of what it set up. There's a really strong pilot.
There's so many episodes of Voyager that are like that that's just like mediocre, laughably bad, mediocre. Like some of
years. It seemed like that was sort of like if there was a Star Trek writer who had a really, really great idea for a Trek series or for a Trek story, and like every once in a while they would pitch it and one would get through. And it would become a Voyager episode because like someone just had like, I've got a great idea for a Star Trek story, and where else are you going to put it? It has to be a Voyager episode because that's the only game in town, and I think it benefited from that. But yeah, I mean, Encounter at Farpoint isn't great, but I don't think it's not like I no longer find it as horrible as I used to. Like I remember when I was younger, I basically just wrote off the entire first season of TNG, and it's still not great. But I find that I like it more than I used to. I mean, I still think it's probably the weakest season of the series. But yeah, I think probably of the pilot episodes, I think it would have to be either Emissary or Caretaker for me. I mean, the pilot episode of Enterprise is all right too, but again, it's like that's another case where it's like the series kind of doesn't live up to the potential that is promised in the pilot.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
I think I remember in one of your videos you said something about like the aesthetic of Enterprise. I love Enterprise aesthetic so much. I mean, look, from outside, their version of the Enterprise does look kind of fugly. I mean, it's very like stretched out and extreme looking, but I kind of like how it's like loosely patched together. But I love the interior of it, and even just that first scene where a Klingon that crashes on Earth and this guy comes out with a pretty contemporary looking shotgun.
Yeah,
I love that idea. Like, this is what you do with a prequel, especially with something like that, is you show us still kind of in that transitionary period between today and what we come to know in Star Trek, where humanity is still kind of in its infancy, just barely taking its first steps into this wider universe. I love that. I don't know why just that period, why that look gets me as emotional as it does.
Yeah,
I guess it's because it's a little easier to imagine us getting to that point.
Exactly.
It doesn't seem quite as far off. So we'll see.
That's exactly the reason why I like it, because it feels like it feels the closest of all the major sets in a Star Trek show. It feels the most like a real ship, and it feels almost plausible. Like you can almost imagine a real ship like that existing just based on those interiors.
Yeah, and there were a bunch of ideas that if the show had more of that sort of thing, it could have really worked. Like them broadcasting back to Earth, like people do on the space station, the physical grapple instead of a tractor beam, the it's another really the fact that they were essentially just carting around separate troops instead of having like a portion of the crew trained for combat.
Oh yeah, with the Makos, yeah.
Another thing you brought up like recently with Scotty and Picard and their whole conversation. It's like I've heard people criticize this trope you see a lot in fiction, or even just in real life, where people will call like a steam engine a she or a ship a she. It's like, why is it always a she? It's like this kind of weird inverted objectification of women, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I can understand that, but I have to admit there is something just about the trope itself that also gets me kind of choked up. Just the way they talk about, like these ships that they spend so long on as like this lost love that, they'll never find again. It's like the pirate captain who is basically married to his ship. That's the most important thing in the world to him. And I don't know, there is something about that I find kind of sweet to get that attached. It does kind of get to me.
Yeah, well, because I think I think almost everybody can probably relate to that, and maybe at first you don't think you can if you've never served on a ship. You might not be able to relate to it literally, but I think everybody has like places that they used to go that they can't go anymore, or places that they used to live that they don't live anymore. And
it's always been there for you.
Yeah, and you can, and it's gone. Or you moved away or whatever, and it's not a part of your everyday life anymore, and you miss it. And that's why that speech that Picard gave, or not really a speech even, it's only a couple lines of dialogue when he's talking about the Stargazer to Scotty, like that really hits me, because I've never served on a ship, but I have places that I don't go anymore that I miss. I have people that I don't see anymore that I miss. And, like I think everybody can relate to that. It's a part of your life that used to be there and now it's gone. And when you think about it, it makes you happy, but it also makes you sad because it's not there anymore. And again, like I said in that video, like it also, it tells us a little bit about who Picard is. It makes him seem more like a real person, which we didn't get a lot of in TNG. So it's it's important.
And I just remembered what happened to L3, and I feel all dirty again. L3 in the Solo movie, she was this like freedom fighter droid, and now her consciousness is trapped in the Millennium Falcon.
Yes.
And at the end of that movie, she doesn't even get to be with Lando anymore. So it doesn't even become that kind of dynamic I was just describing. She has to, be lugged around by some other guy now that she hates. Great.
Oh yeah.
And then 3PO's line in The New Hope was like, your ship has like a most odd dialect. It's like, oh my gosh, she's still there. She hasn't been uploaded into a new droid body or anything like that. She's still in the ship. Oh God, why?
That's one of those. I think that's one of those side effects of people who write sci-fi who don't understand how computers work. You know, because we were talking. I think it might have been me and Jason were talking about Rise of Skywalker a couple weeks ago before we were recording our last batch of podcasts, and there's a big plot point in Rise of Skywalker where they have to get some information out of C-3PO's data banks, but in order to get it, they have to do like a factory reset on him.
Yes.
And
Like, just back him up first.
yeah, that's exactly right. That's both of us were like, I mean, because they say like, well, you know, R2 backed him up, and when we get back to base, R2 can restore his personality or whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, but they're in like a droid shop right now. Can't they just back him up now?
Just
they
grab
not have
any droid.
Yeah.
Do they not have enough hard drive space for his consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because it's one of those. Like, you know, you're not supposed to think about it. It's supposed. I guess they're hoping it's like one of those what on TV tropes they would call a fridge moment, where where it hits you like an hour after you're done watching the movie. You're like, wait a minute, why couldn't they just back him up there? But,
okay,
you know.
but let's remember, if you did not notice that, you did not think that while you're in the theater watching the movie for the first time, wait a minute, why they can't back it up? And you're engaged with the scene, you're like with the characters, and you're just like absolutely invested in the characters. No, don't delete C-3PO. That'll be like, oh, terrible. Oh, but if you didn't think about it at the time I first watched it, it's not really a continuity error, or not really a fault of the movie at the time. If you think about it afterwards, overanalyze the movie and think, oh, wait, that's a mistake. This movie is objectively bad because of that. That's like, okay, listen. Yes, you don't like Rise of Skywalker. I have my problems with Rise of Skywalker too, but just because it's a continuity error or why can't the characters do this is not that good of a reason to say X movie bad.
Oh yeah, I agree. The example I always use for that is the movie The Fugitive. That if you think about it for 5 minutes, the story completely falls apart. But I don't think about any of that while I'm watching the movie. The movie is skillful enough that it pulls me along, and I don't dwell on the plot holes or the contrivances. So yeah, I don't hold any of that against it. I think it's a great movie.
Have you guys seen Hacker Man on Kung Fury?
Oh yes, yes.
Where they're using computer to send things through time.
Yes. It's funny. I was just listening to the song from Kung Fury the other day. I love that song that Hasselhoff recorded for it. I was listening to that in the truck the other day. They're making another one, I think, and Michael Fassbender is in it, which is.
By the way, I watched something on like this free YouTube Red Premium thing. I got to see the first episode of Cobra Kai. I'm like, holy crap!
It's a fun show.
Oh, Cobra Kai is great.
This is pretty good because like, look, there's no mincing words. I've already forgotten the blonde guy's name. Main character. Johnny, yes. Like, there's no getting around it. He is a very toxic, like bad guy, at least at the start. He's just doing everything wrong. But it's not so black and white, because you look at Daniel, and he's not Mr. Perfect either. That's how he portrays himself, but you see that he's kind of a slimy guy too, especially with like all the privilege he's got as an adult now. The way he's basically a celebrity. Yeah, just the way he like talks down to people and such, thinking that, well, he's the good guy, obviously.
So I heard he's older now than Mr. Miyagi was then.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
It's hard to believe, right?
I've seen some readings of the first film that painted like, well, you know, Daniel was kind of a creeper in that movie, and like, okay, yeah, 80s. Johnny was a student in a bad school, okay, but was Johnny, even as a youth, all that bad of a guy? You know, Daniel basically destroyed any future Johnny could have had, and you see that in Cobra Kai. Yeah. Just how like self-destructive he's become because he's just given up.
I think one of the things about the Karate Kid that like that Cobra Kai does that makes it so good is that it reminds you that during the first movie these guys were teenagers. Like
Yes.
in the movie, you watch it, and the movie, and that's one of the things I love about the Karate Kid is that the stakes in the movie could not possibly be lower. These guys are fighting over a regional karate championship. There's nothing at stake, and yet it's treated like it's the end of the world. You know, like everything rides on Daniel winning this tournament, and when Johnny loses, it like wrecks his whole life. But yeah, when you think about it. And you think like, okay, yeah, maybe Johnny was kind of a jerk, and he mistreated his girlfriend, and he was basically a member of a gang, a badass karate gang, and he was a bully, and he was, he did everything wrong, but he was like 17, and that doesn't excuse it. He's still the bad guy, but
he also had terrible role models.
He had terrible
pushing
role models.
him to be bad.
And maybe we shouldn't judge him quite so harshly 30 years later when we look back and say, well, he was a kid and he was misguided. And that's one of the great things about Cobra Kai is that it shows us in his
the
adulthood.
Consequences.
Yeah, and he's still kind of a jerk, but
absolutely, he's a terrible jerk,
but he's a sympathetic jerk.
but like when you look at him and Daniel, especially that last scene where he comes into his dojo and they have their little face off, it's like neither of them have really grown all that much. They're still acting like territorial teenagers.
What was that, Marty?
Oh no, that's probably like something else. Well, if I can interrupt in this,
that was me actually making a comment, thinking I was muted. I was actually talking to Alexa.
Oh, okay.
I love it.
And now all of our Alexas are now turned on. Very sorry about that. But the interesting thing is that actually my dad, in a way to with his free time to exercise and they cut down his weight 30 years ago, he decided instead of joining a gym, he decided to join a martial arts dojo, and so he's been with it for over 30 years. He's a 6th degree black belt in Ankujutsu style karate. But this particular school, American College of Mixed Martial Arts, they don't like the idea of doing competition because how they see karate is like a way of self-improvement. And why do you want to have a competition make it a sports competition,
right,
and have the characters or have the students that are supposed to be learning self-improvement as well as self-defense, and to figure out how best to beat your opponent, figure out how best to beat someone else, and that's why this particular dojo doesn't do that. And each different dojo has their different philosophies, as we saw in Karate Kid, and we will see in Cobra Kai.
And that can be where it becomes toxic in a way, because when you think about really what this martial arts stuff is, it's about self-discipline. It's about controlling the temple, the vessel that is your body,
right,
and not lashing out at others and whatnot.
Yeah. Oh,
and then they make you fight each other for some reason.
Now fight.
Well, sparring, a practice partner, you need a practice partner to do Aikido the way. But another thing that at least what my dad's dojo, American College of Mixed Martial Arts, also does is community, because it takes a village to raise a child, and we all reject the Ayn Rand thing of one man is an island, and so that's the thing. Another thing that some of the teachings of Taoism should be transferred and should be learned, and Taoism actually is kind of anarchistic in a lot of teachings, and there's an essay about that. In fact, that shows you that anarchist ideas are actually far older than Pierre Joseph Proudhon. And that community is also important too. So that's why at least that dojo, when they have the funds to do it, they also do cleaning up the community as well. So and that's one thing also that certain dojos are good about, teaching about community as well as self-improvement. And one can't do it all, so it helps to get others involved.
Yeah, which is a theme in my favorite Karate Kid movie, Karate Kid Part 2.
Oh.
Because the villain for most of Karate Kid is a karate student who has grown up into a bitter old rich man, who has bought has bought the land on which his old village stands and is threatening to kick everybody out and tear it down. Which, by the way,
landlords! Hell!
What a classic 80s plot, by the way. How many classic 80s like action movies and especially episodes of like action adventure shows hinged on an evil developer buying something, threatening to tear it down, and the heroes having to stop them somehow. How much mileage did we get out of that plot?
Oh my God! If only people understand like the evils of landlordism and private property rights, and like people owning the land and not using it, and forcing people all of these things. And if people learned that lesson back in the 80s, maybe a lot of people. Well, then again, who knows if the people in power would.
If only we'd had the sense to kill all landlords back then.
It's like, but it is. I mean, it is kind of amazing when you think like. In the 80s, and it just goes to show that in certain ways, Hollywood was a little bit ahead of the curve in that the 80s was quite possibly, up until now, maybe the most like shamelessly capitalistic decade in American history. And yet so
Reagan
many
and Thatcher.
Yeah, and yet so many of our popular heroes and movies had anti-capitalist themes, if not overtly. Like you didn't have like the characters weren't like avowed leftists who are coming out and saying we need to destroy capitalism, but the
because of USR as commies as well.
Yeah, but that's true. But the villains were often ruthless capitalists who were acting with concern for nothing but making money at the expense of people's lives, and the heroes were people who were the victims of their capitalism, of their predatory practices. And it seems like a lot of us just never quite got that point. Like we never figured out like, hey, wait a minute. The good guys were the underdogs, the people who were threatened by like out of control profit seeking. And we never quite, identified enough with that, or we never quite got that message,
Some people have.
Some people did, sure.
It seems like people tend to think of movies and TV as being linearly getting more progressive, but it almost seems like, to me, I can remember episodes of like WKRP in Cincinnati, all in the Family.
All in the Family.
Well, WKRP in Cincinnati was one that you guys are probably too young to remember it, but
I remember watching a bunch of reruns.
I watched it on reruns, when I was a kid.
There was one episode where Herb Tarlake actually thinks that somebody he's attracted to is a post-op trans woman, and they don't use that language, but you wouldn't have that in a sitcom now.
Oh, those SJWs are getting involved in all this stuff.
Yeah, well, when you watch, that's a great example, and there are a couple of other examples of sitcoms in the 70s and 80s where the message was like tolerance for gay people that even to our eyes today seems shockingly progressive, where the message, I mean, there's always problematic things in them, and there's always things that you can look at, like maybe the way the gay person is portrayed, and you think, they could do that better. But the underlying message is one of just unqualified tolerance and acceptance. And it's like right out there in front, like you can't miss it. And it's like, shows today just, you almost never see that kind of unapologetic, hey, if you have a problem with these people, then you're wrong and you need to change your attitude. And like that just doesn't.
Speaking of shows that were way ahead of their time, MASH. Oh my word. One of my favorite things is like seeing millennials and Zoomers discovering MASH and going like, this is such a mood. Like they relate to it so timelessly, especially like this one great scene where we have these two characters. One of them is, a Catholic priest. They call him
Father Mulcahy.
Yeah, and he let's see. He says, they say war is hell, but I don't agree. Like war is war and hell is hell, and of the two, I think war is worse. And
why do you say that, Hawkeye?
Yeah, well, because what kind of people go to hell? Sinners.
The bad people, sinners.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't see children or old ladies or disabled people in hell, but you see them everywhere in war. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
But that show is surprisingly deep, and it's just great to see that it still holds up. That people are still discovering it all the time and going, "This is really good."
Yeah. There's
I
a
mean,
really there's a really
there's a
great
reason why. I'm sorry,
No, go,
but
no,
there's
go
a
ahead.
reason. The reason why that show was on for 11 seasons lasts longer than the actual war it was supposed to take place at, the Korean War, the Forgotten War, because it's between Vietnam and World War II. But also, that's probably the reason why, in terms at least of percentages of televisions that watching out of all the televisions that's available, how watching the final episode of MASH, which was a made-for-TV movie. It was 2.5 hours or something like that.
Wow.
That was the most watched thing period in television history. 106 million viewers.
Yeah.
That's
That was
legendary.
giant.
Yes, it only got beaten recently in the past like 5 years by one of the Super Bowls because it got 106.5 million. But yet you can argue there's a lot more televisions now as opposed to 1983. So in terms of percentages of like
There's a lot more people watching.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
TV as a whole.
Yes.
Viewers.
And the main reason that Super Bowl ended up beating it is because it was the first time in over 30 years that it could have been a team that went completely lossless throughout their season and the Super Bowl.
Not to mention, it's the Super Bowl. And if there's one thing about us Americans, we love our football.
We love the worst sport.
Yes. Well, it's excellent. It's the modern day Colosseum from the Roman times. The Romans do just give the citizens just enough so that they can survive, and then give them the Colosseum of entertainment so that they're distracted and not noticing all the problems or like how the empire is falling around it. And Noam Chomsky kind of like notices like, why do I care about my high school team winning the Jamboree homecoming game? Why do I care about that? I really don't. I don't even know personally the football players. And so sports is one of those convenient kind of distractions or entertainment. It's just our entertainment. I just want to like sitting down on TV and just veg and just not think about things and watch some football. And a Twitter person, Amy on Twitter, has asked people, what's the most American thing you can think of? And I thought, are you ready for some football? And she liked that.
Do you think back in Roman times that there were fans of the gladiator games that pissed and moaned about measures taken to make the games marginally safer for the gladiators, like the way football
definitely.
fans, like they're letting them wear armor now. Jesus Christ! Yeah, back in my day, they didn't have helmets.
You know,
The gladiators
I don't
were
know.
real men.
I don't know why my brain connected these two dots. I remember things out of nowhere, but you know how Terry Jones recently passed.
Yeah.
He's the good Terry, not the bad Terry.
Yeah,
but-
Terry Jones is
Yes, the good, the good,
The good Terry, because there are two Terrys. Wow. What do you think is your favorite Monty Python skit that featured him? Mine is Mr. Creosote.
That's a good one.
I
Think now.
the argument sketch, but he didn't start the sketch. It was like afterwards because they usually cut the argument sketch after like Michael Palin leaves and stuff like that. But it continues on to like, ooh, no, it's wow. You got to do it like that. Try it again. No, it's not correct. Wow.
They'll get a bucket and we'll throw up.
Oh yeah, Waper Thin Mint. Yeah, it's like I still get grossed out by that show. No, I'm sorry, not Terry Pratchett. That's the best Terry Pratchett. But like we're talking about Terry Jones, one of the Monty Pythons, and maybe the one that doesn't suck because I think all of them. Well, Grant Chapman died in like 1989, so we didn't know if he sucks now or anything like that.
We were spared his angry old man phase, his disgruntled rich white guy phase.
Yeah. But oh man, I really have to think about that. It's like he was in the Spanish Inquisition as well, but he was one that didn't talk that much. It's like I can think of like granted, there was only 6 of them, and so you can easily think of like maybe that one, but it wasn't one that like Terry Jones wrote because he always wrote with Michael Palin as well. So man, I had to really think about that. Why is Terry Gilliam bad? He has said some things that he can choose to identify as a black lesbian helicopter or something like that. We Hunted a Mammoth just covered that.
And he's just grossly out of touch.
Yeah.
He's got this victimhood complex, like, oh, us white men are being blamed for all the evils of the world.
Yeah, John Cleese has also said, oh man, there's too many foreigners here in the UK and stuff like that. And so like, okay, boomer.
Yeah, I'd like to think Graham Chapman wouldn't be quite as far up his own ass. It was just funny because that's his entire character. Most, like 75% of the characters he played for like Monty Python were like these very privileged, well-to-do, very properly spoken, privileged guys. And I just have to wonder, well, I mean, he couldn't have like, was he actually like that in real life?
Yeah. Well, you would like to think.
Well, Boy George has come out and said some things, and so you can't just like they say that like, oh, maybe he wouldn't, and yes, he was gay as well, but like he was also a cis white man as well, who went to Oxford.
You would like to think that like people who make fun of like rich white guys or out of touch people or whatever so sharply like that they could never turn into that, like, but look at what has become of Ricky Gervais. Like he's basically become in real life exactly the kind of person that he used to make fun of in The Office and Extras. And
very
it's like,
posh.
Do you not get that you're basically David Brent with money now? Like
he's a parody of himself.
You're exactly the kind of person you used to make fun of.
It just goes to show that wasn't acting.
He's like, why is everybody laughing? I'm just telling the truth. And Stephen Merchant's like off camera going,
reminded me of the invention of lying, where he, when he had to go like, the world's going to end if we don't have sex. That's not good.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad that movie backed out of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, it's like at the top of the hour, so it's like, hey, unless someone else has like something else to say, because I would just like to like remind people about the charity links down below.
Please do so.
Just one quick admin as well, because my friend Phoenix Rising 87 is back at home, but doesn't like living there with her family. They misgender her and detonate her all the time. So in the plan to try to like leave, she found a place that she can like leave that is like subsidized housing as well. But she has to like in order to qualify, because they can have limited resources, these things, she needs to prove that she can make $400 of income before 3 months. She does get some money from like government assistance or temporary assistance for disabled people, but she, in order to make up for the $200, she needs just to make $200 off of her Patreon. So I'm going to put a link to her Patreon into the live chat right now, and you can also just give her money directly with her PayPal pool, which is like earlier in the live chat. But like, think about joining her Patreon. You can join for as little as $1 a month, and hopefully, maybe, honestly, I think that like she just needs a sugar daddy, just like Joanna and everyone else is disabled, because like in this current system, that's pretty much how it is. Because like if you don't work, well, sucks to be you. But gonna put in the link for the Phoenix Rising's Patreon, and that's it. You can also go and watch Nick Anderson's like a YouTube channel, Nick on the Planet. You can go to rippleplanet.com. I put the link in there.
You mean Planet Ripple?
Planet Ripple, thank you. Put the link in there already, and check out his comics. And Social Justice Acme every Saturday, or mid-pitch already. And Marty Abernathy is also the host of the Tea Party, Party Hardy with Marty. It's right now still in the beta stage, but like there's probably the podcast feed. There's also the YouTube channel, the Tea Party. That's just the Tea-Party. And it's going to be a future thing, and she's going to work on it. She's still working on it, beta testing it. And I've been on a couple of her shows, and so check that out.
How come you never plug my channel?
And
already here.
We could do that as such as alchemy.
That's my entitled white dipshit impression.
No, that's just no. That's
Never
just
plug
you.
my channel.
That's just you performing as Steve in Steven Stuffy.
Yes, the oblivious entitled dipshit. What about me? Huh?
Is Steven Stuffy going to become a capitalist? Will Stuffy rein him back, or will Hans tell him about the evils of late stage capitalism?
I really enjoyed the latest season, though.
Oh, thank you.
Wow.
Oh,
I did too. I think
that was a journey.
I did not see one of my favorite seasons.
I didn't see most of those developments coming.
Yeah. Next year is going to be a doozy too. I'm really looking forward to. I have the general arc of the plot. I know drawn out already. I don't have every single episode plotted out yet, but actually just real quick. And then we'll call an end to the show. In some ways, the last few years, the most fun Stuffy episodes for me to write have been the ones that I do earlier in the year before it comes back full time in September, because those can be a little more freestanding. Like I came up with an idea a couple days ago for an episode that I think is going to be in April during the mid-season break in the Whirlpool. Where it's going to be me, the main plot is going to be me, Toby Benson, and Jack looking out the front window at two drunk people having sex on the sidewalk. And that's it.
You just, one last thing, you mentioned the Whirlpool just now. I got to say, the Whirlpool has grown harder for me to watch over time. And these days, it's basically unwatchable because it feels so real.
It's a little close.
It's because, look, Trump and his lackeys and all these Fox News fuckers and just all these awful people on TV just barking lies in our faces every day. And it's not even like, oh, just don't watch this stuff. No, you basically can't escape it.
Yeah.
Like on Twitter, like on the internet now, it's just people constantly lying to your face. And look, I hate lying. If I ever have to tell a lie to somebody else, I feel a little sick afterwards. Like a Dementor just sucked a bit of soul out of me.
Right. Yeah, sure.
And I just don't understand people who don't have that instinct, who are able to lie like almost pathologically, who just do it all the time. I don't get that, how they're wired that way. But
you have empathy for other people.
Right.
But I also hate being on the receiving end of that. And when people are just lying to me all day, basically saying, yes, I think you're stupid enough to fall for this, it just drains me. I feel wrecked. Yeah. Because I'm so used to that, I try watching the Whirlpool now, and I just feel like I can't take that. No. That just means you did a good job.
The thing is, though, I mean, if you go watch the show that it's based on,
The Vortex,
it will totally change how you watch it, because the guy, I mean, Steve, you've done like such a good job mimicking him.
Thank you.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
The mannerisms and like the speech pattern and all of that is like a parody of Michael Voris, the real guy. But I like that in last year and then this year so far too. Like it's not just a straight parody of that show. Hopefully I've succeeded in building like a weird little world for him to live in, and and making him a conspiracy theorist. I think Michael Voris is a little bit of a conspiracy theorist too, but not as outrageously as Michael really is.
If we manage to turn things around later this year and things aren't quite so bad and we aren't constantly being verbally assaulted by these people on a daily basis, then maybe it'll be a little easier for me to watch the Whirlpool. So. It's just that right now in this weird bizarro land, I don't know. I guess I'm too drained already.
No, I completely get it. I mean, I don't feel that way in relation to the Whirlpool, because I find it cathartic to write stuff like that and to make fun of those people. But I mean, just, I've only been able to watch just a little bit of the impeachment trial because it's so.
I haven't at all.
It's so disheartening.
Lie.
The thing, it's not just the lying. I watched a little bit of some of Adam Schiff's presentation, and he was so good. And,
Yes.
and I mean, it was really like a historic performance. And knowing that half of the people he was talking to in that chamber just don't care, and it's not going to make a difference. Like, here's this guy having this fucking Jimmy Stewart moment where he's up there telling truth to power and saying, look, this is an urgent threat. We have to remove this guy. Here's all the evidence. Here's all the reasons why we know he's a bad guy and he's committed these offenses, and it's all impeachable and we have to remove him, and he's brilliant. And it just doesn't make any difference because the majority has already made up their mind.
Well, the powerful people want to remain in power, so they'll do everything that they can, whether it's constitutional or not, and to remain in power. And so if you create these positions of power, those kind of people are going to gravitate towards that. And I would argue, do we really need those positions of power anyway? But like, hey, we're already at the top of the hour, and like, we don't need to we don't need to go any further into like my politics. Check out
I
social
think we've
media
all
for
made our
that.
points.
So I just wonder if Michael Worley is going to become the spokesperson for Donald Trump.
I tell you what, what he has done, he has transferred, since the head of his church was deposed last year, he has transferred his hero worship onto Trump this year. Because the new head of the church is his brother, who he hates, so he can't fixate on his brother as like his idol. So his idol now is Trump.
Well, hey, with Jack being Obama's VP for a time, I feel like anything could happen in the Steve and Stuffy verse now, which Michael Worley does live in, it seems.
I had an idea. I need to write it down. I had an idea for this coming season, like probably more like a side plot. For Jack that touches back to his love for Barack Obama, because that's one of my favorite parts of Jack's character is that he loves Barack Obama, and the main reason he loves him is because he mistakenly thinks that he's Irish, and that's it. That's but it is completely like there is no he is absolutely devoted to Obama and will hear not a word against him, and which of course is the main reason why he became the Attorney General and then the Vice President in the first place, because he wanted to protect Obama.
Does Jack know that, like, but the most famous Irish person in America, Shaquille O'Neal?
Shaquille O'Neal, yeah. But yeah, so anyway, I need to jot that down so I don't forget it. But Jack's Obama fixation has not come up lately for obvious reasons, but I do want to.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Yes.
Just have a speech about all of the grand Irish Americans. Keith Oberman.
Oberman, greatest sportscaster who ever lived. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So anyway, we're over the hour by a good ways, so we're going to wrap this up. But thank you all thanks to all of you for joining me, and thanks to everybody for watching. Patreon.com/Steve Shives if you want to join my Patreon campaign.
We didn't fill up either. We had like at most 7 people, and like we didn't fill up. So like, even when the show's going on, check the links anyway. See if you can get in.
Yeah. I mean, don't bother coming in now because it's over.
Yes.
Like there's somebody will come in like I'll go off the air, but I haven't ended the call yet, and someone will pop in and go, hey, and I'll be like, fuck, what have you? Where are you an hour?
Why are you here?
We can't hang out now. I have to go. Anyway, so thanks to everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.